So when we start thinking about these triggers, they're all different, right? That's just an overview, a very generalized overview of South America. But a lot of different areas of the world have these different changes. Some people have seen me do my talk called The Mad Aquarist. It's the most requested talk that I do, and I've done it all over the place. And it's different every single time I've done it, and it changes up all the time. And it's fun, and I love bringing it to the people. But basically, it's an introspective look at my life as an aquarist and all the foolish folly that has gone on without me even not even thinking about the house, the family. Like, I just absolutely everything for the fishes and throw all caution to the wind. And there's been a lot of really crazy stuff, and every time everybody sees it, there's always some people that are always laughing and falling out of their chairs and stuff like that. They can't even imagine some of this stuff that I've put my house and my family through over the years. But it's all for the fish. It's all for learning. If you're not learning, you're dying. Like, have some fun. Sit there with a chair and a nice drink and just take it in. Just sit there. And I don't care what kind of fish you keep, but you got to be having some fun doing it. Otherwise, no real point, in my opinion. But one of the things that reminds me, that comes back to me, is in one of my talks, I talked about a fish that I spent, I know it's well over 13 years. It might be even as high as 17 years. But there was one particular species that I worked with for that long, and not like an average aquarist that worked with one pair of fish and didn't have success. No, I worked with hundreds of specimens, and if I couldn't if I couldn't breed this fish with hundreds of specimens, and I was sacrificing males and females to the microscope and doing some internal biologies and stuff like that. And I was sending correspondence over to Africa, and I was getting rainfall patterns. This is before the internet. I was asking the departments of entomology and stuff like that over there to see if there's weird insects that do certain things at time of year using the lake. It's a species from Lake Tanganyika. I didn't mention that, but it's Neolamprologus sexfasciatus, and it's the blue form. And to this day, not a single person in the world has bred this fish. And that baffles me to absolutely no end, because it's a Neolamprologine, not to talk above anybody, but if you're familiar with any of the Tanganyikan cichlids, the bulk of them are Neolamprologines. Your Burchardi, your Calvises, and all those different stuff. There's a lot of species of Neolamprologus, and they're all amazing fish. And I did Tanganyika for, I'm pretty sure I did it for about 19 years, and I was pretty concentrating my efforts and studying on those fish and stuff, mainly for dissections and taking that little bone out of the back of their throat called a pharyngeal mill. But I did do mostly breeding and studying of that little bony structure, and it was part of the times while I was in university doing my secondary education. And we're going to talk about the pharyngeal mills in a different video down the road. It's in my notes of one of the things I do want to bring to you, because a lot of people ask me questions about it all the time, and that's really cool. But this one little species lives in a very isolated pocket in the southern part of the lake on both sides. It's right on the bottom tip. But there's two color forms of the same species. And in captivity, everybody knows Neolamprologus sexfasciatus by the yellow morph. It's brown and yellow. It's yellow with brown stripes. And it lives just above it on both sides of the lake. Little areas, both sides of the lake, and then the bottom part of the lake, the blue form. Every Neolamprologus that has been discovered and described that is available in the trade or harvested as wild has been bred in captivity, and they all breed the same way. Some a little bit different way they use their spawning receptacle, like crevice spawners or open spawners, whatever. But they all lay adhesive eggs, and they all take care of them and stuff like that. Similar, wonders of cichlids that we all love. But this one species, this one color form of this one species has never been bred anywhere in the world. Now, I'm just one crazy aquarist in Canada. But you think about some of these absolute legends in Germany and Holland and Great Britain and stuff like that, that if these guys can't breed it, what's the chance of some Canadian breed it? And you're probably thinking at the end of this, I'm going to tell you that I bred it. I never did. Nobody to this date has bred that color form. And I've had discussions with people like with Ad Konings and some real René Kruter and some of these real well-known icons that know this lake as if it was a pond in their backyard. And I was totally on board thinking that it was some sort of an insect that did something at a certain time of year, and if the female ate it, it caused a chemical reaction, and then they'd produce this roe, and then they'd kind of come into a season. And that was completely blown out of the water. And Ad Koenig says he's seen them many times, and they have fry year round and stuff. So it's still a mystery. And that's the stuff that drives me crazy. I love it and I hate it all at the same time. But I'm not keeping Tanganyikans right now. I've diversified and I keep all sorts of different stuff all the time. But that's just one species that it intrigues me. Hopefully it intrigues you too. I don't know. So I want to get back to like why we were talking at the beginning. We were talking about how all this technology in the video and everything and all these advancements and stuff like that we have, that we can actually sit now down, we can sit with our phone and we can actually witness spawning, not just laying eggs. Everyone keeps cichlids. They see how they go through their motions of laying eggs, and then they have their plaque, and then they take care of it, they herd the young through the tank. That's really, really cool. Or watching a beta build a bubble nest, or the birth of their very first live bear, watching that happen and stuff like that. These are things that are amazing, and they're all good because they all get you there watching it and enjoying it. But the nice aspect about videotaping, or I guess not taping, but using your phones and your cameras now, is that you get to go back and re-look at that stuff when you upload it to your Facebooks and your social media posts and stuff like that, or your YouTubes. And you can see things that maybe you weren't looking at the time. Oh, like what's happening over there, 3 inches to the right in the back. You know, that's kind of neat. I've never seen that behavior. And that observational biology is absolutely intrinsic in helping science evolve and establishing. People that have known me a long time know that my fish room is generally free. If I breed something and I got a lot, I have no problem. I will still take fish to the BAP auctions, and I'll still take fish to this auction, and I will still do all those sorts of things. But if you're a friend of mine and you stop by and we sit around and chat and you say, oh, that's a really cool fish. If I got some, you're going home with a bag of them. Because if we don't start dispersing and standing this up, not worried about, those are $7 each. No. They're free. You can have them. I'm not saying you guys don't spend a lot of money on your fish and stuff like that, but let's talk cichlids here. Like when you breed a Central American cichlid, you're going to be hell sprung to try and get rid of all those offspring anyways. So giving a bag of 6 to somebody that's pretty eager sounds like a cool bet to me. So I'm doing it. You don't have to do it. I'm doing it. When I was down at Max's place, he gave us a bag of probably one of the absolute rarest Central Americans we've never even seen. He handed us this bag. It was like a full net pull and stuff like that. And like, we only need like 8 max. And he says, oh, no, that's good. You can give them to share them with some people up there. That's exactly what we did. Buddy of mine, Austin Johnson in PA, he's given it out to a couple of really hardcore hobbyists. Karen Haas and Alan Rawlings, amazing people. You've heard about them before. They've given me fish over the years. The fact that we can give them something cool back, that's aces in my book. I brought some back here. I gave them to a good buddy, Ray Quinnell. I gave some to Jim Cummings. And we got some guys down in Ohio we want to get some of those fish to and get them really, really established because we need those fish in the hobby. These fish are not available ready. You can't just zip on down to Costa Rica and dip a toe and come home with some fish. This is not a country you can pull fish out of easily. And most of the world is starting to crack down in that too, and that you can't just haul everything out anymore. And not only that, the wilds are disappearing. We're killing everything. We're poisoning everything. We're doing everything. A lot of these Mexico areas and stuff where you have these little cenotes, they're destroying them to turn them into resort areas. So they rip all the plant life out and make it into beach resort areas because, you know, you don't want to go swimming by the beautiful waterfall and have your toe touch a plant. So we're just going to rip out all that. Well, that was the habitat that those two species in the background used. And that's why the yellow one is almost completely gone because we've killed its habitat. We didn't kill the fish, we killed its habitat. And then we did a bunch of irrigation canals all around it. And when we did the irrigation canals, that water has to come from somewhere. So that irrigation water is coming from some other location and connecting all along, and other species get introduced, and other species often tend to mix. And that's bad for species, especially something as cool as that one. Now, it'd be hard to go without saying, but like, think back. You think back at some of these older breeders and stuff like that. You think back in the 50s, the 40s, maybe even the 30s and stuff like that. If you were really, really extremely passionate about finding that something that you caught out of a pond or a ditch or your local lake or something like that, or you ventured into a small pet store and you got your first fish, think this fish selection you would have had available to you then would have been fairly small. You know, maybe paradise fish and some of your basic live bears and, you know, very few basic South American fish. Because getting these fish in and out of these areas and the sheer distance and the technology available in transportation to actually get any of these things there safely was huge challenges. But don't just think about that. These fish are well established and entrenched as an organized hobby, and they're available and they're produced commercially all over the world, and they're in all these hobbies and these pet stores and stuff. These are the guys that did it right out of the wild and ignited that whole flame. Try and imagine the tools that they had available to them in that era, and try and imagine doing that today. How about I give you a wild pair of convict cichlids or Oscars, or even angelfish. You ever dealt with wild angelfish? They are mean. But let's take a wild pair of any of those. Now, let's start out with, let's say, the Oscars. Okay, we're going to do Oscars. We need a group of Oscars. So we can't just go and buy two. You can't go to the store and say, that's a boy, that's a girl. They're not like live bears. They don't show they're not out there exposing their bellies and stuff and showing off everything, you know, all their private stuff to everybody. They keep it hidden. So you can't just generally go and buy two. You got to buy kind of a group. And me, depending on the species I'm trying to look for or work with, I buy a minimum of 8. If it's something exceptionally difficult or delicate, I'm a minimum of 12 to 15. I've been known over the years to walk into stores and literally if I see something, I just take a Sharpie and I write my name on the tank. I take the whole tank of whatever they got. I don't care if it's 12, 15, 24, 48. If that's a fish that I want the whole thing to get my established breeding group because that's what I want to work on, that's what I do. Not saying you have to do that, that's what I do. But it's cool. But now, think about the tools that these guys had. So maybe they got to buy 4, 5, 6 Oscars. Even finding some of those in that quantity at that time might have been a challenge. Now they're going to take these things home. Now, challenging is getting them home is one thing, too, because a lot of the plastics were still in the infancy, so actually transporting them in the fish bags may not have existed. Maybe there's different methods. Maybe there's glass jars. Don't really know. But somehow they got them home and they got them established. Heaters would have been in their infancy. The aquariums would have been metal trimmed on average, and they probably had rock slate bottoms. Whoever thought of putting rock on the bottom? But whatever. You still find those old treasured tanks around, and there's collector items now. They're just really, really cool collector items. But imagine doing Oscars with a 10-gallon tank, that tank that I mentioned, your basic tap water, otherwise you're collecting snow or rainwater, you know. I don't know, depending on where you live, that might be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. There's probably not a lot of commercial aquarium pet food available. You know, you probably have a very, very limited selection of that. It's probably going to be basically a flake food, and that's it. And everything else is going to rely on you collecting it one way or another to try and figure out what that fish eats. The amount of information about the habitats of a lot of these different fish wasn't readily available. So you were guesswork a lot of the time, trying to figure out what they needed. You didn't even know how big some of these got, or how small they stayed, or what they did, or were they cave spawner, or what, you don't know. You're just kind of winging it. Think about filtration. What did they have available? Well, they had very primitive air pumps. Maybe they had a little tiny box filter. All right, you go to an antique pet store, you'll find some of these old things, little tiny plastic or glass, little almost like a jar, and you put charcoal in it. They hadn't even invented carbon yet, but charcoal, literally. And then you put a little bit of that polyester wool on top of it, and you trickled water or air through it with using an air pump. It works just as good as a sponge filter, maybe not as efficient, but I know some really hardcore old-time breeders doing live bears, killies to this day, and their whole fish rooms are still run using those old box filters. They're tried and they're true, they're reliable. They get a little bit brittle over the years, but they still work very, very well, and there's no reason. We as North Americans tend to try and go, and everything's got to be moved faster and bigger and stronger, and that's just not the case with a lot of fish. Maybe it works for some fish, it doesn't work for all fish. So try and imagine that. Don't close your eyes because you want to stare at me. I'm just gorgeous. You want to stare and drink this all in. But try and imagine doing those Oscars or those convicts or those wild angels in that type of environment. That's what you've got available to you. There wasn't really much else. Either you find it in the wild, because I guarantee you the selection that would have been available, very, very minimal. And those type of stories you can find in Rosario's book. You can find in Ross Sokoloff's book. There's so many of these guys that had just amazing, amazing things. You start going back, you often go to these book sales and stuff. He could find some of the old FAMA, Freshwater and Marine Aquarium magazines. You get some of the really old ones. A gentleman by the name of Gene Lucas, like he used to write columns on stuff back in the day. These guys were absolute true legends and true pioneers. And they've gifted to us all those years and years and years of amassed knowledge. And we should be taking it in, and we should be sharing it with each other. And we should be exploding on that and exploring even further and sharing what we've got with each other, because we have no idea where we can even go. So with that, hopefully I had some fun. I don't really know. It's a little bit different. But I do want to finish up and close you off with a quote from my favorite book, my favorite childhood book. So today's gone. Tomorrow is fun. Tomorrow is another one. And every day from here to there, funny things are everywhere. And the reason that's important to me, that's how I live. I got 4 wonderful daughters, an amazing wife, and they inspire me every single day to be a better man, better father, better dad, better partner. Maybe one day I'll figure it out, but right now we're still having fun. Fish keeping is fun, and I sure hope it is for you too. From the Mad Aquarist to you, thank you for joining me. Take care.